South Sudan is one of the most important countries to understand if you want to understand modern Africa. It is the world's newest widely recognized sovereign state, becoming independent on July 9, 2011, after an overwhelming referendum in which 98.8% of voters supported separation from Sudan. But independence did not bring an easy beginning. South Sudan was born after decades of war, and within only 2 years, it fell into a devastating internal conflict of its own. Today, it is a country of enormous human resilience, rich cultural diversity, vital natural geography, and deep political challenges. Its story is not simply about crisis. It is about how a young nation tries to build institutions, identity, and peace while carrying the weight of a violent past. Geographically, South Sudan sits in East Africa, with no coastline and many neighbors. Sudan borders it to the north, Ethiopia to the east, Kenya to the southeast, Uganda to the south, the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the southwest, and the Central African Republic to the west. This location makes South Sudan a bridge between Northeast, Central, and East Africa. Its capital and largest city is Juba, located in the south along the White Nile. Being landlocked shapes the country's economy and politics because trade depends heavily on roads, regional cooperation, and access through neighboring states. For a young country still recovering from war, geography is both an opportunity for regional connection and a major logistical challenge. The landscape of South Sudan is varied and often dramatic. Much of the country is made up of broad plains and plateaus, with dry and tropical savannas stretching across large areas. There are also inland floodplains, seasonal wetlands, and forested mountains. The defining physical feature is the Nile River system, which flows from south to north through the country. At the center is the Sud, one of the world's largest wetlands, a vast swamp formed by the White Nile. The Sud is difficult to cross and has historically shaped settlement, transport, agriculture, and military movement. In South Sudan, geography is never just scenery. Water, flood cycles, cattle routes, and river access influence livelihoods, politics, and survival. South Sudan's population is estimated at just over 12.7 million people in 2024, and it is one of the youngest societies in the world. Roughly half of its people are under the age of 18. That creates both pressure and possibility. A young population needs schools, healthcare, security, jobs, and food systems that can support rapid growth. But it also represents immense potential if peace and development can take root. The country's people are mostly Nilotic communities, with many ethnic and linguistic groups. These identities are complex and deeply rooted, tied to family networks, cattle culture, local authority, land, and history. Understanding South Sudan means understanding that it is not one simple society, but a mosaic of communities with different experiences. Religiously, South Sudan is also diverse. Many people identify as Christian, while others follow traditional indigenous faiths, and there is a significant Muslim minority. These religious patterns reflect long histories of local belief systems, missionary activity, regional trade, and interaction with northern Sudan and neighboring countries. But in South Sudan, identity is usually shaped by more than religion alone. Ethnicity, language, cattle wealth, local leadership, and political alliances often matter just as much, and sometimes more. This complexity is important because outsiders often reduce South Sudan to simple categories. In reality, the country's social fabric is layered, and peacebuilding requires understanding how communities organize themselves, settle disputes, share resources, and remember past violence. To understand why South Sudan became independent, you have to go back to Sudan's colonial and post-colonial history. In the 1800s, Sudan was occupied by Egypt under the Muhammad Ali dynasty. Later, from 1899 until Sudanese independence in 1956, it was governed as an Anglo-Egyptian condominium. This colonial arrangement brought northern and southern regions under one state, despite major differences in history, religion, language, economy, and political organization. After Sudan became independent, many Southerners feared domination by political elites in the North. Those fears were intensified by uneven development, disputes over autonomy, and conflict over how the country should be governed. The roots of South Sudan's independence movement were planted long before the country existed. The First Sudanese Civil War eventually led to the creation of the Southern Sudan Autonomous Region in 1972. This gave the South a degree of self-rule and seemed, for a time, to offer a political compromise. But the arrangement did not last. In 1983, Southern autonomy collapsed, and the Second Sudanese Civil War began. This second war was even more destructive and lasted more than 2 decades. It involved battles over power, identity, resources, religion, and the structure of the Sudanese state. Millions were displaced or killed across the wider conflict period, and southern communities were deeply scarred. The war also produced powerful liberation movements and military leaders who would later dominate South Sudan's post-independence politics. The turning point came in 2005 with the Comprehensive Peace Agreement. This deal ended the Second Sudanese Civil War and restored southern autonomy through the formation of the Autonomous Government of Southern Sudan. Crucially, it also promised a referendum on independence. When that vote took place in January 2011, the result was overwhelming: 98.8% supported independence. For many South Sudanese, the vote represented liberation after generations of marginalization and war. On July 9, 2011, South Sudan became a sovereign state. Celebrations in Juba and across the country were filled with hope. But the new country inherited weak institutions, armed factions, unresolved grievances, oil dependence, border tensions, and the enormous task of governing a war-shaped society. South Sudan's early years as an independent state were fragile. The government was led by figures from the liberation struggle, especially President Salva Kiir Mayardit of the Sudan People's Liberation Movement, or SPLM. Riek Machar, another major political and military figure, became a central rival. The problem was not only personal rivalry. The new state had to transform a liberation movement into a functioning government, integrate armed forces, manage oil revenues, provide services, and build trust among communities that had experienced decades of violence. Political competition became tied to ethnic loyalties and military networks. In a state with weak institutions, disputes at the top could quickly spread into armed conflict across the country. In 2013, South Sudan descended into civil war. The conflict, which lasted until 2018, caused enormous suffering. Various parties were accused of grave human rights abuses, including forced displacement, ethnic massacres, and the killing of journalists. Civilians were often targeted not just because of where they lived, but because of who they were perceived to be. The war deepened ethnic mistrust and destroyed livelihoods in a country that was still trying to build basic state capacity. It also forced many people into camps, across borders, or into survival strategies shaped by hunger and insecurity. South Sudan's civil war showed how quickly the promise of independence could be overwhelmed when political conflict became militarized. After 2018, South Sudan entered a fragile peace arrangement. The country has been governed by a coalition involving leaders of the former warring factions, including Salva Kiir's SPLM and Riek Machar's SPLM-IO, the Sudan People's Liberation Movement in opposition. This kind of power sharing can reduce open warfare, but it does not automatically create lasting peace. Many of the deeper problems remain: local armed violence, ethnic insecurity, competition over land and cattle, weak justice systems, and a lack of public services. The article describes ongoing and systemic ethnic violence, meaning that even after the civil war's formal end, many communities continue to face insecurity. Peace in South Sudan is therefore not a single agreement. It is a long, unfinished process. South Sudan is a member of the United Nations, the African Union, the East African Community, and the Intergovernmental Authority on Development. These memberships matter because the country depends heavily on regional diplomacy, humanitarian support, and cross-border trade. Yet it remains one of the least developed countries in the world and ranks at the bottom of the Human Development Index. Its economy has historically recorded the world's lowest nominal GDP per capita, reflecting extreme poverty, weak infrastructure, conflict damage, and limited state capacity. Still, South Sudan's future is not fixed. Its young population, strategic location, river systems, and cultural strength all matter. The central question is whether peace, accountable governance, and development can finally give the world's newest nation the stable foundation its people voted for. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.